It's a common observation that in life, smart people are very often not all that successful. And on the other hand, dumb fucks are. I'm going to try and control my language a little bit in this one, but I could really go to town in this podcast. So let's just talk about what we mean by success. Well, for most people, success means probably money, power, and fame. And any one of those might take a preference, but usually money's in there somewhere with all three of those. And so in our fucked up society, we've come to believe that by amassing a large amount of money, we somehow survive more adequately. Well, at a physical level, maybe, not necessarily. It depends how you got your money and how many people you got coming after you with machine guns. But generally speaking, we equate money, power, fame with a better ability to thrive. But in terms of mental well-being, spiritual well-being, whatever that word might mean, then many of these people who seem to be successful are the least successful in life, and I'll come on to that shortly. But anyway, smart people may well not be, and very often are not, all that successful in life, and I'll get on to the reason for that shortly too. There's a certain arrogance associated with wealth now. It's kind of, I got a lot of money, so fuck you. I don't need anything else. I don't even need happiness. I've got money. It kind of is like that. It's a blind thing. And as I drone on about infinitely in these podcasts, this is all driven by the will to life. And many people are blindly driven by this will. They're driven by it to such an extent that very often it makes them very unhappy, but they don't even know that they're desperately unhappy. They suffer, they might even commit suicide because of what they're doing. But it never occurs to them that their fundamental values of money, power, and fame might actually be fairly bankrupt sort of values. Anyway, society has purchased the least attractive model for life. There's no satisfaction in these things, and in fact, here's some kind of satisfaction for those people who see all the most vicious and very often dumbest people on the planet accumulating great wealth. The people who are driven most by the will to life also happen to be the unhappiest people on the planet. Why is that the case? Well, they are the unhappiest because the will to life is basically just driven by desires. I want this, I want that, I want more of this, I want more of that. And life is not, it doesn't show preference to one person or one activity over another. Life really couldn't give a shit about somebody's desire for more money or to have a perfectly valeted car or whatever. And I've known some fairly wealthy people, and these people get to the pitch where literally, if there is a fingerprint on the dashboard of their car, their new Mercedes or Porsche or whatever, it sends them into a fit of depression for a day. They get angry. They phone up the valeting company. They tell them that they're going to ruin them, and so on and so forth. So these people who are very wealthy and exercise power through that wealth are very often the most unhappy people on the planet. But let's get to the situation where most of us find ourselves, which is the work situation. So what you'll very often find is that the brightest people are actually managed by the dumbest people. Why is it like that? Well, there's a scale of intelligence. At the bottom of the scale is a level of intelligence where that intelligence will simply serve the will to life. It has no real reflective capability. It's just, I want this, so what do I have to do to go and get it? And that going and getting it may involve cheating, lying, and in fact usually does involve those things. And a person operating at that level has no vision or desire to go beyond anything other than, I want this, I want that. This is how I get my promotion. I'm going to piss all over that other guy's work, or I'm going to slag him off to the boss, or whatever. So these people who operate at that level of intelligence, there's nothing much more going on other than this desire to serve the will to life, to acquire more status, money, whatever, to assure their existence. That's all that's going on, and so they become very good at it. And then you get the next level of intelligence, which is people who, maybe appreciate things like music, or maybe they appreciate art, or maybe they appreciate philosophy or whatever, or maybe they have some religious inclination. And so the whole of their intelligence is not geared towards simply the will to life, because the will to life is not served in any way by you becoming an artist and doing art in your spare time, maybe, or by becoming an amateur musician, or by reading philosophy. The will to life has no interest in that whatsoever. And so these people really have an excess of intelligence. In reality, the will to life only wants them to lie and cheat so that they can survive more effectively. So they have this excess of intelligence. It is not serving the will to life per se. And if you want to read more about this, then read Schopenhauer. I mention Schopenhauer in almost every podcast, but the man was just a genius. And then we get to another level of intelligence, which I shall talk more fully about a little bit later, but where someone has enough intelligence to look back at life and think, what the fuck? All these creatures eating each other, and all these people shitting on each other. It's surely a recipe for massive suffering, and of course it is. But I'll get onto those people a little bit later. So we get into the work situation where the people who become managers and who become bosses achieve those positions because they have less intelligence. That lower level of intelligence is focused purely on their own aggrandizement and their own career and their own ambition, just the will to life, and they see nothing else, and so they're really good at it. And so they know how to take credit for other people's work. They know how to diminish other people's efforts. And they're very, very good at displaying their capability to their bosses, who are like them, and saying, yes, look at me, I know how to lie, cheat and steal, and I can, because I'm good at this, I can work well on behalf of this business or whatever. And so the people at the top look at that and think, oh yeah, George is a good lying bastard. He'll do well for this company. And then they look at maybe, let's say this is a business in the IT industry. The bosses are these sort of self-promoting, self-seeking types. And then you have a whole pile of fairly clever guys who are maybe programming or technicians of some sort. And the people at the top look at them and they think, well, these guys are a bit clueless. They don't know how to lie, cheat and steal. No, we're not going to promote someone like that. Now, there are some exceptions. There's one guy who's reputed to be the cleverest mathematician in the world when it comes to trading systems, trading foreign exchange or stocks and shares and all that kind of thing. And there's a very good video on YouTube. I shall try and seek it out and put it at the bottom. If I don't, it's because I can't find it. But he was interviewed, and he just happened to say in the interview, he said, I can't understand what all these bosses at this bank are doing. So they haven't got a clue what we're doing. They're creating very abstract and powerful mathematical models for trading systems. He says they haven't got a clue what we're doing. Why have we got all these managers? Well, he's a little bit naive. Those managers are there because he doesn't know how to lie, cheat and steal. I mean, he probably does to some extent, but he's nowhere near as good as these guys who are his bosses, who've taken the credit for his work and go swaggering around to their bosses saying, look how well we're performing. I've organised these people so that they are producing this wonderful work. And of course, that guy hasn't organised them because he hasn't got a fucking clue what they're doing. So, the bosses in the main, managers, business managers, are generally not all that bright, but because they're not all that bright, they're very, very they're like chimps or monkeys. They're just really sort of tricky characters that know how to lie, cheat, and steal, and how to take credit for other people's work and all that kind of thing. The really bright people in the organisation are not so adept at that, and so they don't do so well, and they don't make as much money. I knew a guy very, very well at one point who was an accountant. His world consisted of money. I mean, he wasn't even interested in power. It was just money. So he liked to flash it about a little bit. He got a very, very nice Porsche. And he was always at the most expensive restaurants, yada, yada, yada. He was a habitual thief. He knew how to cook the books for any organisation he was working for so that money ended up in his bank account. Sometimes I'd see him in a restaurant and he would be sat there with his wife, and his wife would be weeping. She was so unhappy. And this guy just seemed to have no cognizance of the damage he was doing to the people that he was around, both his family and the people in the working environment that he was in. And it's a strange thing, there's something in life. You cannot be like that without it taking some toll on you personally. And I phoned somebody, I lost contact with this guy, and I happened to speak to somebody who knew him. I said, how's Fred? He said, he's had a nervous breakdown. He's considered as mentally unstable at the moment. And, that's the kind of thing that happens to people who are violent in that way. And it's sort of like they haven't got enough intelligence to look at themselves and say, I'm doing this huge violence not only against other people, but I'm doing it against myself. And surely this is going to have some repercussions. So they're not even that intelligent. So, the one consolation for all those people out there that consider themselves to be fairly bright, but have never been able to be particularly successful in life, the people who are basically the less intelligent part of the species, who do very well, very often suffer very, very intensely. And, those people typically can find no pleasure in aesthetic things like art or music or just abstract things that are there to be enjoyed for their own sake. They just have no facility to enjoy that. I mentioned that there are really three levels. So we've got the dumb fucks down at the bottom who generally end up being people like business managers. Then we have the fairly bright people who are not so good at lying and cheating, but still part of the system, but they tend to not thrive so well. And then we have the people higher up who have enough intelligence to look back at the whole thing and say, what the fuck is all this about? And those people can have a fairly hard time of it because they look at it and they're part of it, they're part of the system. And you can't isolate yourself from it completely. But maybe they have more drive to try and engineer a life that is more for their own purposes. So, maybe they have some kind of job that they don't have to fully commit to, and it just gives them enough money to live a reasonably simple life. In fact, for these people, simple will be the key word. They don't want debt, they don't want all the fancy new gadgets, they don't want to put a lot of effort into things that are, in essence, meaningless. And they dedicate themselves to whatever it is that is of interest to them, which might be some religious pursuit. Personally, that's not my thing, but if that's what gives someone some meaning outside of this zoo that we live in, then so be it. So, just to summarize, the reason that smart people tend not to be all that successful is because they're not focused on being successful and the effort that is required to achieve that, which usually consists of lying, cheating and stealing. If you are a lower intelligence person and you're good at that kind of thing, then you will do very, very well in life. So what I suggest is that if you value success, as our society defines it, more than being happy, then go and get a lobotomy and join the rest of the monkeys that are, down there lying, cheating and stealing. I'm sure that one day somebody will make a business out of that, just like there's a new business selling the blood of young people to old people. Yeah, grotesque but true. Anyway, that's the world we live in.